Alright, I'm back with another Outriders video because I kind of want to keep evangelizing about the state the game is in order to try and get the player base up, because I feel like it deserves it at this point given the changes they've made. I promise I have not been bought off by them sending me an Outriders shirt at launch here, but it's a good shirt, what can I say? I did kind of want to talk about why I am so kind of excited about going back and playing Outriders now, and how much fun I have been having kind of against all odds given where we've been here. First of all, where we've been, Outriders suffered from two exceedingly terrible problems that really marred launch to an extent that kind of may have crippled the game permanently, honestly, given what happened. The first one is pretty much the worst thing that can happen in a looter, where it was just erasing everyone's inventories. You would just log in and all your stuff would be gone, your character would be naked, and in many cases you couldn't log in at all to even like keep playing to get new stuff. And it took about a month to fix that. So in that time, a lot of people either lost their stuff and couldn't play or didn't want to play, or people were afraid to play because they didn't want to lose their stuff. So that caused a mass player exodus, and it took a month to fix. They've since done kind of, they got everyone's gear back, no one lost anything permanently, but if you've given up on the game during that time, it would be hard to blame you. But the second thing, they immediately kind of ran into another problem that had plagued the game since launch, in that things just didn't like feel right. Like, that's kind of nebulous, but there was a lot of inconsistency with damage, both being dealt and taken, and especially survivability in a lot of cases, where certain enemies would just kind of one-shot you out of nowhere, and it felt like you weren't wearing any armor at all at times. And then they realized there was an issue with damage mitigation to some degree, and they had some big technical explanation for it, but that also took about a month to fix. And that has led us to this latest patch, which was not fixing a massive bug or problem or gear loss issue, but it is actually getting to quality of life stuff and improving the core content of the game, which is the legendary drop rate. They doubled it everywhere. I talked about this in a video a couple days ago, but they doubled it. They have anti-duplicate protection now. And what's happened now is like all of these things have kind of combined to mostly fix like all of the major things that were wrong with the game, at least at a kind of hyper severe level. I said before, and I stand by this, that Outriders has really good fundamentals as a looter. They understand how to create interesting builds and interesting gear combinations and skill combinations, and they at least have some kind of coherent endgame farming loop in place. The problems with that was it's still kind of based on DPS and timers and stuff, but with the other problems kind of solved, like there's no more real like damage inconsistency. Like if you die, you pretty much know how you died now. You're not just getting one shot anymore. Connection stability is a lot better, so you're not just going to be dying to lag and stuff, which happened previously. And then the farming is better because you're getting more stuff now. I'm excited to jump back in, and I'm farming tier 14s and tier 15s, whereas before it was like maybe you're getting one legendary every other run, which felt terrible given the giant legendary pool that you're trying to sift through. Now you're getting anywhere from 2 to 4 a run in the same difficulties, and it's a lot between that and duplicate protection. It is a lot easier to find kind of those pieces you're missing and assemble not just one final build, but a bunch of builds you can experiment with. And what has happened now is, to me, this almost fully feels like Diablo Rift farming. Outriders has taken many, many lessons from Diablo. They've said this openly in discussing kind of their inspirations. They wouldn't really, reference Destiny or The Division, but they're like, we were inspired by Diablo. And obviously kind of all looters in the looter shooter genre are inspired by Diablo to a certain extent, but Outriders like really took it to that level. And pretty much the way the endgame farming loops now is how the greater rifts work, except they're like 15 set maps rather than procedurally generated. And you can say they're repetitive and the endgame is repetitive, but like all endgames are repetitive. Like in this genre, like you are going to run into a point where you're farming the same stuff over and over again. It's just a matter of like, are you having fun? Is gameplay enough fun to be enjoying yourself? Is the loot good enough to chase? And the answer for Outriders, for both of those, for me right now, is yes. That wasn't always the case, and it was very unrewarding and unfulfilling to farm as much as you had to for gear before this patch, and in doing so run into all these bugs and issues and things like that. But now everything is kind of combined to create a much more cohesive experience. I always liked the base campaign of Outriders. I thought it was a much more interesting and more well-structured campaign than most games in this genre. I say very few games in the looter genre have like very good campaigns, but I actually really liked this sci-fi story. I thought it was interesting, and I thought the way it was structured with kind of making it as hard or as easy as you wanted and getting different rewards based on that was good. I don't know if the legendary drop rate change is going to necessarily mean that the campaign playthrough is going to be like dumping a bunch of legendaries on you. It should be improved at higher levels, and bosses should give you a wider range of things, but obviously kind of the real end game when everything really starts is the expeditions. And now that system, like at tier 15, you have a 50% chance times 4 drops at gold to get a legendary. So it is, I have already been completing sets like that I abandoned for a month and a half because of the way the new system works. And if you get a duplicate, they have a chance to re-roll it one more time to see if you don't get a duplicate the second time. It's a little confusing, but overall it does help with duplicate protection, and you will be getting somewhat less of the same items. It's not a guarantee, it's not a knockout system, but it is much better. I like Outriders because I have a very clear goal of kind of what I'm working towards. Like I wrote this example in a post I wrote today where like I just leveled up a Pyromancer this past weekend. All I did was race through the campaign in like 5 hours just to get to expeditions, and now I already have it at level 50 gear, which with not even that much playtime, but I'm still kind of building up, you know, my different sets and stuff I'm looking for there. And I ran a tier 15 with a different Pyromancer who had like the full Akari set, like everything kitted out, and like he was just roasting everything. Like I barely could keep up because of how fast he was clearing these tier 15 enemies. And like if you're that person, like I guess only running that at that level could get boring at some point, but like for me now, that is my goal. Like I want to get my Pyromancer to that level. And like once I do that, and once I'm totally dominating the game with that set and that build, I can switch builds. I can try and do another set on Pyromancer and see if I can do any better with different gear. Or I can switch to one of my 3 other classes and try and do different, you know, overpowered builds for them. And it's a place where I have clear goals and like what I'm trying to accomplish, in that I want to speed farm tier 15s as much as possible, to get the most drops possible, as fast as possible, to build the most builds as possible. And yes, it gets to the point where it's like, well, what are you even gearing up for? But like, this is Diablo Rifts. Like you are gearing up in order to kind of clear the highest difficulties you can, as fast as you can, in the most fun way you can, with these different kind of creative builds and sets. Borderlands is like this too, to a certain extent, and like that's kind of what you're shooting for here. And I do believe that they are going to make future content for Outriders. If I had to guess, given by it, that Square Enix has been satisfied with how the game's performed. So I don't feel like, even if I do kind of set these characters down at a certain point, which I'm okay with, like I don't need seasonal, ongoing, weekly content to do. I feel confident that I probably will be picking them back up in the future for some sort of new content, new level cap increase, a new class, something like that. So all in all, like I am feeling good about Outriders in its current state. I know if you have been turned off by the game before, I get that, but I think at least some of the core issues that everyone was kind of dealing with at the time, the latency, the connection issues, the gear elimination, the damage mitigation, all of that stuff, for the most part, is fixed now. There are still issues. Matchmaking is still not a great system. The DPS checks on the timers for the endgame runs are not the most fun. They've already talked about, you know, potentially changing that system to accommodate more types of builds. But that's what I mean. Like now they've kind of gotten the absolute biggest issues with the game out of the way, and they can focus a lot more on quality of life improvements now that they don't have these giant kind of massive game-breaking bugs hanging over their heads. So I'm excited about that because I think there's a lot more, you know, potential to explore, and I expect them to kind of go the Borderlands route of buffing a lot of things while keeping nerfs kind of relatively minor. So that's where things are now, and that's kind of why I'm excited to go back and farm this in a way that, like, I'm not, like, I never got there with Avengers. Like, Avengers has had a new update. I still don't, I don't know what I'm going for there. Like, I have these max characters, but, like, I don't know what build I'm going for other than stacking one stat and a bunch of elemental damage. Like, or I don't know what activities I'm gearing up for to use those characters to farm. Like, there's no loop there. And then Destiny is the seasonal model, so you're kind of locked into, you know, the ongoing content releases. And like, I'm still playing that every week, but you know, once you do like a raid or whatever, like for the week, like you're kind of done. Whereas Outriders, I can just keep farming this loop as much or as little as I want. I'm also about to hop back into Borderlands because they just had this huge update. They raised the level cap, turned all the events back on. It sounds like a lot of fun, so I'm going to go back and do that too. So I might have something to say about that. But I do recommend Outriders now, especially if it's on Xbox Game Pass and you're on Xbox. That's where I'm playing. There's no reason not to because it's free. And I really think it is in a much better spot, at least especially the end game is in a much better spot than it was at launch. I think they has some really difficult issues, but they did for the most part. And I think they will continue improving the game. And I do think there is more content to come. So I'm on board. That's all I can say. Like, if you disagree with me, like, that's fine. I understand it's not going to be for everybody, but I'm having a lot of fun with it, and I think that you could be too if you hop back in and gave it another shot. Depends what stage of the game you're in, as certain stages will be more fun than others. It's probably the most fun at the very end game right now with the drop rate increased, but I guess it just depends on your amount of patience and what else you got going on. But that's all I got for now. I don't know if I'll be doing a ton of Outriders stuff. We'll see what the interest level is, but I do recommend it now, and yeah, we'll see what happens. But thanks for watching, and I will see you guys later. Take care.